There's only one thing worse than being an inmate, and that is being a popular inmate. And what inmate could be more popular than the man who masterminded the death of Tupac Shakur? Meet KEEFE D, the man who would have the largest target on his back in any United States penitentiary. With state facilities essentially being the breeding ground for gang violence, there are many reasons why KEEFE D should be scared in prison. Behind bars. The long-awaited manhunt for the murderer of Tupac Shakur has finally come to a conclusion, and it only took 27 years. On the 13th of September, 1996, 25-year-old Tupac would meet his unfortunate end at the hands of a drive-by shooter. For years and years, the murder of Machiavelli has been shrouded in mystery and was known as the biggest mystery in hip-hop history.
Tupac was in the car with Marion Suge Knight, who was grazed by a bullet. No one has ever been arrested for Tupac's murder.
Now, hip-hop historians, as well as fans of Tupac Shakur, can breathe a 27-year sigh of relief as law enforcement officers have officially found and arrested the killer, Dwayne Keith Davis, also known as KEEFE D.
Hey, Keith, Metro Police, come over here. Hey, Metro Police, come over here, all right? Oh, thanks, buddy. Come on over here. Appreciate your cooperation, okay? I'll stand right here in front of the car. Yep, nope, go and put it down. I know, hang on, put that down.
If I were KEEFE D in that circumstance, surrendering willingly is not an option, because from this moment on, the world's biggest target is about to be on his back. In any prison or correctional facility he steps foot in, there is only one thing people would care about. Is that the man who killed Tupac? That is the question that would be echoed from top to bottom, from the warden himself, from one correctional officer to another, from one inmate to another, even down to the prison cafeteria staff. If KEEFE D gets convicted of the first-degree murder charges, he would be sentenced to a Nevada state prison, which boasts some of the most dangerous and stone-cold ruthless inmates as well as correctional officers. Now, there are different security levels in Nevada state prisons. It goes in numbers from level 1 to 4, and then there's close custody on top of that. The close custody is essentially level 5, but they don't call it that. Before coming into contact with the inmates, KEEFE D would initially have to go through the brutal officers. Let's listen to the confession of a former inmate in one of the Nevada state prisons.
What was the procedure like going through there?
So the COs they're, I haven't been to other prisons, so I can't compare them. But in my mind, these people have to be the worst in the country. They're just, you know, they do all this screaming and rah-rah.
KEEFE D's first day in the pen is not going to be a rosy one. The guards would be needlessly cruel and merciless to him. The standard things done to the inmates on the first day by the correctional officers include shaving their heads and faces, throwing delousing powder on them, taking their pictures, and finally escorting them into their cells. Now that is for the standard run-of-the-mill inmates. For a famous offender like KEEFE D, the violence during this process is going to be cranked up to 11.
So it sounds quite brutal, and doesn't it, on first arrival?
Yeah, it's a process. That first day is
with the guards out of the way for now, it's time to meet the gang. The Nevada State Prison is home to quite a number of gangs, comprising of the most ruthless and hardened gangsters. Let's get them out of their cells and into the yard for a brief introduction and overview. Most of the inmates belong to one of 6 main prison gangs: Nuestra Familia, the Mexican Mafia, the Aryan Brotherhood, the Black Guerrilla Family, the Northern Structure, or the Nazi Lowriders, with the last 2 being offshoots of Nuestra Familia and the Aryan Brotherhood, respectively. The members of the different gangs interact like volatile chemicals. All it takes for a violent reaction to occur can be something as trivial as stealing a glance from a rival gang member or mistakenly bumping into each other in the cafeteria. The correctional officers are fully aware of this territorial. If you open their cells in such a way as to put, say, a lone member of Nuestra Familia in a crowd of Mexican Mafia, the mix can explode violently. So the guards release them in a careful order.
We have the whites, or the Woods, and the Southern Mexicans, or Sureños. We run together. The Paisas kind of run under the Sureños, and they're Mexican-born national Mexicans.
The former inmate mentions 3 key factions here: the Whites, the Woods, and the Sureños. The Whites are synonymous with the Aryan Brotherhood. The Woods are short for the Brotherwoods. The name Brotherwoods is a combination of the names of 2 established prison gangs, the Aryan Brotherhood and the term Peckerwood, which is a racist name for poor whites adopted as a gang name for a number of white racist gangs scattered throughout the United States. The Sureños are groups of loosely affiliated gangs that pay tribute to the Mexican Mafia while in United States federal and state correctional facilities. Many Sureño gangs have rivalries with one another, and the only time this rivalry is put aside is when they enter the prison system. Gang fighting is common among different Sureño gangs, even though they share the same common identity. The Sureños have emerged as a national gang in the United States, with their territory extending all over the nation. Their main stronghold is in Southern California, but they also have quite a heavy presence in Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, Utah, and of course Nevada. They have a smaller presence in states like Illinois, Oklahoma, Georgia, Oregon, Oregon, and Washington, and as far east as New York. The Sereno gang is an all-star gang. They take part in all spectrums of crime, from petty carjackings and home invasions to robbery, assaults, and drug trafficking, all the way up to kidnapping and homicide. They are actively involved in all aspects of criminal activity. Their primary sources of income are the retail-level distribution of hard drugs such as cocaine, heroin, marijuana, and methamphetamine, both within prison systems and in the community, as well as the extortion of drug dealers. Sereno members may also have direct associations with Mexican drug cartels and broker deals on behalf of the Mexican mafia and their own gangs. Over the years, the Sereno gang has cultivated an alliance with the oldest and most notorious racist prison gang in the United States, the Aryan Brotherhood. The Aryan Brotherhood, also known as the Brand or the AB, is a United States-based neo-Nazi prison gang and an organized crime syndicate. They have been characterized as the nation's oldest major white supremacist prison gang and a national crime syndicate by the Southern Poverty Law Center. With an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 members both inside and outside prisons, that number might seem quite small. But according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Aryan Brotherhood is responsible for a disproportionately large number of prison murders, even though they make up an extremely low percentage of the entire U.S. prison population. In order to join the Aryan Brotherhood, new members may swear a blood oath or take a pledge. Acceptance into the Aryan Brotherhood is aided by a prospect's willingness to kill another inmate. The gang typically engages in criminal activity that any other criminal entity does, particularly drug trafficking, extortion, inmate prostitution, and murder for hire. Its whites-only membership varies from prison to prison, but it is hierarchical, headed by a 12-man council, which is topped by a 3-man commission. That's quite the power structure. They are very distinct in terms of symbolism and imagery, using tattoos and specific items to identify themselves, including shamrocks, swastikas, and other symbols.
For us, the Woods and the Serenos, we have our own showers, we have our own phones that we use, we have our own tables. Nobody else from a different race is going to use any of that, or else it's going to be war.
As mentioned before, the Aryan Brotherhood and Serenos are pretty tight with one another, and unfortunately for KEEFE D, this is the gang where he finds himself, the Southside Compton Crips. Now, apart from KEEFE D and his fellow Crips already being sworn enemies to the Bloods, he now has 2 more dangerous prison gangs to keep watch against, the Aryan Brotherhood and the Serenos. Now the Crips are no slouches themselves. Their growth and influence increased significantly in the early 1980s when crack cocaine hit the streets and they began distributing it. Large profits induced many Crips to establish new markets in other cities and states. As a result, Crips membership grew steadily, and the street gang was one of the nation's largest by the late 1980s. As with most criminal street gangs, Crips take part in illicit activities such as illegal gambling, drug dealing, pimping, larceny, and robbery, from which a lot of their income comes. Now, anyone who has heard of the Crips has heard of Bloods. This rivalry dates back to the 1960s and right up to the 1990s. This non-ending tussle between the Bloods and Crips raged on, and it eventually culminated in the death of Tupac Shakur by none other than rival gang member KEEFE D. Now that KEEFE D is heading to prison, there are 3 gangs he needs to be wary of: the Aryan Brotherhood, the Serranos, and his direct rivals, the Mob Piru Blood. But let's take a few steps back, about 27 years of steps, and let's examine the events that led to the death of a cultural icon. KEEFE D, a moving target. The shooting and the aftermath of Tupac's death is the only part of the story shrouded in mystery. The inception and the build-up to the murder are very well established, with a lot of moving parts and active pieces, from Tupac himself to Suge Knight to Orlando Anderson, finally KEEFE D. In the same year he dropped his most commercially successful album, All Eyes on Me, Tupac Shakur would meet his unfortunate end. On the 7th of September 1996, Tupac Shakur attended the Mike Tyson vs. Bruce Seldon boxing match with Suge Knight at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, Nevada. After leaving the venue, one of Suge Knight's associates, Trevor Trey Lane, a member of the MOB gang based in Compton, California, spotted a member of the rival Southside Compton Crips gang called Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. This Orlando Anderson happened to be the nephew of this video's protagonist, KEEFE D. Now, this exchange did not just start from here. It had been building up for quite some time. A few months prior, Orlando Anderson and a group of Southside Crips tried to rob Trevor Lane at a mall in Lakewood, California. Lane informed Tupac Shakur of the previous incident, who then decided to attack Anderson in the lobby. Shakur asked Anderson if he was from the South and hit him in the face, knocking him to the ground. Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight's entourage also got in the mix and assisted in beating up Anderson, with the entire scuffle being recorded on the MGM Grand's video surveillance. After the altercation, Tupac Shakur returned to his hotel, the Luxor Las Vegas, and eventually departed with Suge Knight in a black BMW 750 IL sedan. At about 11:15 p.m., a white 4-door late model Cadillac pulled up to Suge Knight's right side. The shooter, seated at the back of the Cadillac rolled down the window and immediately fired gunshots at Tupac Shakur's BMW. Tupac was hit 4 times in total, twice in the chest, once in the arm, and once in the thigh. One of the bullets also went straight into Shakur's right lung. This was deemed very fatal, and he passed just 6 days later on September 13th. After his death, certain individuals started to suspect foul play from Suge Knight. Former Death Row artists such as Snoop Dogg later accused Suge Knight of being a part of Tupac's murder. Former Detective Russell Poole also had a theory that Suge Knight killed Tupac before he could part ways with Knight's label. With Suge being notorious for having strained relationships with his label artists, this theory might have some basis, but it's still just a theory. The Las Vegas police officers could not make arrests based on such theories. They first needed to go out there and make some arrests. Fortunately for the cops, they got a whiff of the news that a certain fight had taken place between Anderson's gang and Tupac Shakur's gang. They also noted that KEEFE D heard about this fight and immediately started hatching a plan to get revenge. KEEFE D got a firearm from a close associate, police said, and gathered Orlando Anderson, Terrence Brown, and DeAndre Smith to go with him in the infamous white Cadillac. Little did anyone know that this incident right here would ultimately lead to the retaliatory shooting and death of Tupac Shakur, said Johansson, the police lieutenant. Eventually in the investigation, Anderson was named a suspect along with his uncle, KEEFE D. Media reports circulated on the street that Anderson bragged about shooting the rapper, which he denied in an interview for Vibe magazine later. Anderson would be detained in Compton a month after the shooting with 21 other alleged gang members. He was not charged and eventually got released. Anderson died 2 years later in a separate gang-related shootout. Right up to his death, he maintained he had no involvement in Tupac Shakur's death. Now that's the story we know from the outside. Let's take a look at these same series of events from the eyes of KEEFE D. His perspective of the incident has come through 3 different platforms: a 2008 confession to the police for immunity in a PCP ring case, a 2018 BET show called The Death Row Chronicles, and his 2019 memoir called Compton Street Legends.
You said the shots came from the back. Big Dre, Orlando. Who shot Tupac?
To keep for the code of the streets. It just came from the backseat, bro.
KEEFE D started the confession by citing an alleged meeting with Sean Diddy Combs at Greenblatt's, where he requested the hit on Tupac and shoot Knight for $1 million. Like a lion on the Serengeti, I'm able to smell and see fear. Puffy was full of fear, KEEFE D mentioned. He claimed Diddy's issue with Knight stemmed from Knight's infamous diss to the Bad Boy executive at the 1995 Source Awards. He told Diddy that it won't be a problem. He also claimed Hit 'Em Up, the most acclaimed beef track in hip-hop history, angered the Southside Crips too, because Tupac allegedly said, "If you want to be down with Bad Boy, then f*** you too." Now take note that Diddy has absolutely denied this series of events, telling LA Weekly that KEEFE D's account was pure fiction and completely ridiculous. The Southside Crips had a regular tradition of visiting Las Vegas to watch Mike Tyson beat down his boxing opponents. Little did they know that this trip to Vegas, unlike the ones before, would change their life. After the fight, he and the Crips planned to rendezvous in the cafe at the MGM Grand, but Orlando Anderson, aka Baby Lane, his nephew, didn't show up. It was at this point that Anderson was getting hopelessly beaten by Tupac and his gang. Then, some 118 East Coast Crips came and told us that they saw some death row jump on my nephew down by the casino, he said. It was at this point that it became more personal for KEEFE D. He claimed this made the hit on Tupac more urgent. When conversations would come up about $1 million bounty on the heads of Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur, that was business, he said. But after Tupac, Suge, and them death row niggas jumped on my nephew Baby Lane, it became ominously personal. They planned to go to Club 662 for a death row after party where Tupac was supposed to perform. This was where he first planned to confront Suge Knight, whom he had long known. But after Tupac and Suge Knight didn't show up for about an hour and a half, KEEFE D called his crew off. Lucky for them, they never showed up because it would have been like Al Capone's Valentine's Day massacre if they had, he said. When the group got out to buy champagne, KEEFE D sat in the passenger seat, he claimed, with Terrence Bubble Up Brown driving and Orlando Baby Lane Anderson and DeAndre Freaky Smith in the back. He then described seeing Tupac stick his head out of a BMW, Bubble Up turning their car around and pulling up next to Tupac and Knight at a stoplight. He wrote that Knight looked terrified and Tupac reached for a gun. That's when the fireworks started, he stated. One of my guys from the back seat grabbed the Glock and started busting back. They then drove off and even saw the 2 ambulances carrying Tupac and Knight. The group ditched their Cadillac and then popped their champagne and partied like it was any other night. He showed very little remorse in writing about the alleged first-degree murder. The moral of the story, real gangsters are nothing to f with, he wrote. He went on to call the shooting another day at the office and wrote that Tupac's death was collateral damage. 27 years after the shootout, 4 years after the last confession, it was finally time for KEEFE D to pay for his sins. On September 29, 2023, KEEFE D had a date with Destiny and was taken into custody by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police in connection with the murder of Machiavelli himself. Greg Kading, a retired Los Angeles police detective who spent years investigating the Shakur killing and wrote a book about it, said he's not surprised by the arrest of KEEFE D. He put himself squarely in the middle of the conspiracy, Kading said, adding that KEEFE D himself gave Las Vegas police the ammunition and leverage to move forward. Kading further added, all the other direct conspirators or participants are all dead. KEEFE D is the last man standing among the individuals that conspired to kill Tupac. Remember that Tupac's death came as a result of an altercation between two rival gangs, the Southside Compton Crips and the Mob Peru Bloods. This rivalry had been going on for the past 30 years prior to Tupac's death and is still raging on to this very day. Let's get into the roots and foundation of this gang war. Southside Compton Crips versus Mob Peru Bloods. This rivalry dates back to the 1960s when certain Crip members attacked Sylvester Scott and Benson Owens, two students at Centennial High School. After this fiasco, Scott went ahead to form the Pirates, while Owens established the West Peru Gang. In the early 1970s, several gangs felt bullied and victimized by the Crips due to their incessant attacks. These gangs joined the Pirates to establish a new federation of non-Crip gangs that later became known as Bloods. Throughout the 1970s, the rivalry between the Crips and Bloods grew, accounting for a majority of the gang-related murders in southern Los Angeles. This rivalry eventually reached its peak with the shooting and premeditated murder of Tupac Shakur by Southside Compton Crips. But the story didn't just peak here, it was just the beginning. Now, who exactly are the Southside Compton Crips? They are a specific set of Crips gang alliances based in Compton, California. Believe it or not, there are over 30 sets of Crips. Some notable examples include the Rolling 60s Neighborhood Crips, 83 Gangster Crips, the Grape Street Crips, and the P.J. Watts Crips. During the 1970s, most of Compton and the territory east of Long Beach Boulevard was dominated by certain Crip sets. The only unclaimed territory was the area west of Long Beach Boulevard, which is where the Southside Compton Crips formed. During the crack epidemic, the Southside Compton Crips operated numerous drug houses throughout their territory. This information is going to be relevant later in this video. With more than 30 sets of Crips, there are bound to be multiple Crip-on-Crip rivalries, but none can be as violent as the rivalry with the Bloods. The single most infamous thing that the Southside Crips are known for is the shootout that ended up killing Tupac Shakur. It is rumored that they allegedly celebrated his death too. The Mob Peru Gang themselves are also a set of the Peru Gang Alliance, which is itself part of the larger Bloods Alliance. The most popular of their members is Suge Knight, the co-founder and former CEO of Death Row Records. After Suge became affiliated with the Mob Peru set at some point, he hired many Mob Peru members in Death Row Records. When Tupac Shakur joined Death Row Records in 1995, he also became affiliated with the Mob Peru. Suge Knight's office in Los Angeles was distinctly decorated in red, the color of the Bloods. He opened a private, by-appointment-only nightclub in Las Vegas called Club 662, so named because the number spelled out M.O.B. on telephone keypads, M.O.B. standing for Member of Bloods. During the 90s, the friction between the Southside Crips and the Mob Peru was at an all-time high, and the murder of Tupac Shakur ignited a series of unfortunate events. After allegedly celebrating his death, an all-out gang war erupted between the Mob Peru Bloods and Southside Compton Crips. Starting from September 9th, just 2 days after the infamous Tupac shootout, the Bloods sought revenge on the Crips. A rash of drive-by shootings left 3 people dead and 12 injured. In response to this mindless violence, the police conducted raids of the houses of known gang members. The mindless violence went on, and on the 29th of May 1998, it would be the end of the line for Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. Anderson and his friend Michael Doro confronted Michael Stone and Jerry Stone, 2 members of the Corner Pocket Crips, as Anderson believed Michael owed him money. A gunfight erupted, resulting in the deaths of Anderson, Michael, and Jerry, and the injury of Doro. If you thought that was the end of needless gang violence in this story, wait till you hear this. After the murder of Tupac Shakur, the second most infamous crime associated with the Southside Crips is the murder of Yetunde Price. She was the oldest half-sister of and personal assistant to the leading tennis players Venus and Serena Williams. And on the 14th of September 2003, she was murdered in a drive-by shooting in Compton, California by 2 members of Southside Compton Crips. At the time, Price worked as a personal assistant to her tennis-playing sisters and also as a nurse. She was a mother of 3 kids and took multiple jobs because she was determined to pay her own way in the world. Despite accepting some financial assistance from her sisters, Price continued to live with her children in their house in a rundown district. Remember, I previously talked about the Southside Crips operating numerous drug houses throughout the crack epidemic. On that fateful night, Yetunde Price was having a conversation with her boyfriend in her vehicle, parked innocently outside what subsequently was revealed to be a crack house in suburban Compton, Los Angeles County. According to the prosecution at the subsequent trial, 2 members of the Southside Compton Crips street gang, who were apparently guarding the house, rained bullets at Price's vehicle in the belief that they were defending the crack house from gang rivals, presumably the Lime Hood Peru. Price's boyfriend, who later stated he did not realize that Price had been shot, drove her to a relative's home where he called emergency services. She could not be resuscitated and was tragically pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital from a bullet wound in the head. Senseless violence is not only limited to the streets, it's common in the pen too. Recently, there has been news about certain celebrities and rappers getting murdered as a result of gang violence in state prisons. This is one of the reasons why KEEFE D can't afford to sleep with both eyes closed in any of the Nevada state prisons. State prisons are state correctional facilities operated by state governments and house people convicted of breaking state laws. They typically house more violent criminals or people who have committed more violent crimes, unlike federal prisons, which are generally safer and keep inmates that are of a less violent and dangerous nature. Such examples of federal crimes include certain sexual offenses, including child pornography, drug dealing, and trafficking, and specific white-collar crimes including money laundering, illegal insider trading, and identity theft, racketeering, and immigration crimes. State prisons also have lower security than their federal counterparts. All these combine to make state prisons the perfect breeding ground for gang violence. A very popular example happened on the 25th of April 2023, when the prison officers at Soledad were dumbfounded by what they saw. During a standardized prison count, it was soon found out that Jamie Brugada, professionally known as Money Sign Suede, could not be found in his cell. The prison guards responded immediately and went on the search for Money Sign Suede. During a search, he was found unresponsive in the shower, with his body discovered with signs of a knife wound to his neck. If KEEFE D wants to prevent this fate, he might have to avoid taking a bath. Another popular example of prison violence occurred when members of rap groups YSL and YFN were at loggerheads. Both groups are headed by Young Thug and YFN Lucci, respectively, both men being successful Atlanta rappers with an ongoing beef since 2017. After a lot of back and forth online disses for 6 years, the online squabble between both gangs manifested in a real-life all-out prison brawl. Young Thug's YSL and YFN Lucci's crew were seen battling each other inside the Fulton County Jail. A video of their fight went viral on the 11th of April, where someone from YFN's side was seen fighting a member of the YSL group. The YSL member was being hit repeatedly and was heard screaming in pain and agony. Towards the end of the video, a YFN member seemed to be using a razor to peel off his crew tattoo. This could very well be what awaits KEEFE D at the hands of mob Piru Bloods in prison, or could it be at the hands of other rival gangs such as the Aryan Brotherhood or the Serenos? For KEEFE D to have a long shelf life in prison, he would need to ally very tightly with fellow Southside Compton Crips for maximum protection, and even that may not be enough.